Welcome to Stateless. It's a podcast about what building actually looks like in the trenches, behind the scenes, not after it worked, not once the narrative is established, but in the middle of it, when you're fixing the mistakes, carrying doubt, and deciding if it's worth pushing forward. Most stories we hear in this space are edited after the fact, but the choices that shape everything happen when things are still half formed, fragile, and unclear. That's what I want to capture here. Today's episode is with Antony, the founder of Zap. Zap is building the rails for everyday crypto payments, infrastructure that has to be invisible and reliable at its core, yet simple and tangible for the people who use it. We talked about where the idea came from, what it feels like to be a founder before launch, the pressure of coordinating a team and a vision, and how you build community around something so deeply technical. This is episode 2. This is Stateless. Hey, Anthony. Super excited to have you here with us on our Stateless today. How's
Yeah,
it going?
it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me on. It's going good.
Yeah. I feel like you were kind of the obvious choice. We've known each other for a while, and I've kind of seen your journey building that. So I think it's time for the public to know about it too. Um, so before we go into the project itself, I'd love to know about your story, like what kind of stuff you were working on before that. What's your background? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So I guess the story is I spent like a decade at university, mostly in fundamental science and computer science, a bit of electronics engineering, and I'd been in crypto since about 2016, sort of seeing it where it evolved from, especially like in terms of Ethereum. I think they call it like DeFi summer, right? Like tokenization to everything. And going through computer science and sort of mathematical physics, I could see that crypto had like some really cool maths and like elegant solutions to things. Like it was a little bit rough in the early days, but the challenges were super cool. But over the time, UX sort of hasn't really improved a lot. It's gone a little bit better, but UX has sort of like stayed where it was. So, thinking about a career at the point where I got sort of out of tertiary education, the options for me were like, well, do I go and sit and try and get a job in academia? Like science was going through a really hard time at the time. Like it was going through heaps of layoffs, like universities were just cutting jobs. And I was like, well, this is to do a postdoc or something like that. It's going to be real hard work. And crypto had always been there at that point. It was like 6 years in or something like that, or 5 years in. So, I thought, okay, well, best thing to do is try and apply for a couple of jobs in crypto. Ended up getting a job at a ZK firm, sort of ZK Gaming, which was super good. Learned heaps about ZK and Rust and all of that, that stuff. And thought, okay, well, I had Zap, well, not the idea for Zap, but like the start of what Zap was and is now sort of cooking in the back of my head. And I figured, the best way to go for it would be, go full in on blockchain and crypto. So yeah, that's sort of how I ended up here, back from mining in the early days and now here.
Okay, so you're a real OG. So did you always imagine yourself working in something like user facing? Like you mentioned the user experience not being so good in crypto. I totally agree, by the way. Did you always feel like this was like your pathway in crypto?
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard one, right? Because as a, I don't know, I don't know if I'd even consider myself like a developer. I'd probably consider myself like a scientist at heart. But like, scientists tend to want to be stuck in stuck in an office room, closed doors, no windows, or at least that's how I sort of wanted to be. Just working on the thing I wanted to be working on. So doing something like user facing, where you have a product and you need to tell a story and all of that sort of thing was completely sort of different from what I expected, but it was in a lot of ways it needed to be that way. Like you can't put out a product in Web3 or something, or just work on a problem in Web3 or blockchain and expect it to be uptaken by a bunch of users. Like it just doesn't work that way. So it was like it wasn't really expected that you know I would become the face of Zap or something like that, but it just needed to happen. So yeah, a little bit different from what I had expected at the start, but that's just how it is.
Yeah, I mean, expectations versus reality is always different. Like
Totally.
being a
Yeah.
founder, you just expect that you have it all figured out, but in the end of the day, it's not just a product that you're building, but you're building a company and something that you want people to use. So in order to use it, they need to understand and know, trust it basically. Even if
Yeah.
you're working with trustless products, then they still you still need to build that trust into using it basically.
Yeah. Absolutely. And like that's probably the biggest thing with like sort of like the crossroads of blockchain is that it is trustless, like you just mentioned, but for people to use your product, they need to trust you. So yeah, yeah, it's a good point.
Yeah, that's a funny one actually. But like, do you think your background prepared you for this mix of being a founder, working on products, but at the same time creating the infra that will power your product?
Yeah, I mean, I think like technically the background like from science definitely prepared me for the technical side of it. Like you don't. There's a lot of um, abstract algebra to zk and things like that, and the computer science background obviously teaches you how to program and like what's going on in that regard. I don't think anybody, unless you're doing like a marketing degree or business degree, like teaches you how to do business, especially in Web3. Like it's a bit of a different animal. It moves so much quicker. Um,
Just
and
got to
people,
do it.
yeah, yeah, and you know, trying to get attention in Web3 is super difficult. Like you almost have to pull out all the stops to try and get someone to notice you or someone to notice your product because there's just so many people doing things in Web3 and like companies and projects going on. So yeah, it's a super competitive field. So I don't know, like you sort of
Like,
just step up to the plate and try. Yeah,
yeah, I like to see it as a consistent fight for attention. Basically, that's
yeah,
exactly what it is.
yeah, totally, totally.
So now going to Zap, like where the idea of Zap came from in the first place.
I think like really the idea for payments came along after I'd walk into like back home. I'd walk into just a regular shop. It could be any shop. It's not like at home they call these convenience stores or small convenience stores or dairies, right? And I'd always see on the point of sale terminal like surcharge 1 point something percent or 2% for like some sort of Visa debit or you know whatever debit card transaction. It always used to like grind me a little bit, like like this is just terrible UX. And apart from the price of the thing, you have to pay for just like the facility to use your card, and it's like, well, what am I going to use? Am I going to use cash? Like, who uses cash these days? Like, hardly anybody. I know people love cash, but we're in an electronic world. Like, sorry guys, like everybody uses their phone or their debit card. And I suppose like that just worm got into my head for a long time as I was, finishing off uni and looking at crypto, and just things started to really come together. I think when I was a kid, I used to be very obsessed with how banking worked and how like the electronic magnetic strip on the card worked from a kid. So I think it's sort of been in there for a while, but payments has always been something I thought, as a society or as an industry that we could just do a lot better. So yeah, that's sort of like where the start of the idea came from.
It's an interesting story. So, what problem would you say you were the most obsessed with solving, or the end user with that? Because obviously payments are mostly a problem for businesses. Like they have to share a cut of the price with a tribe or stuff like that. But like for the end user, what is the main problem that you're trying to address with that?
Yeah, I think like obviously there's two sides to the product. You've got the user side, and then on the other side you've got the merchant themselves. So one of the biggest problems we want to solve for the merchants is just not having such a big like bite taken out of their profit margin at the end of the quarter or whatever for their payment provider. Like that's one problem. And the other one from the user side, and it sounds like super corny and super polished or whatever, but it's just making blockchain invisible for them, really. Like they shouldn't have to know that they're using blockchain or using Web3 to get the benefits from using it, right? That's the essence of it.
Yeah, I feel you. The UX in crypto is always so dramatic. Like it's not like I tried so many times. I don't know about you. I tried so many times to just explain the concept of a wallet to my family and my friends, and every time it's the same answer. Just go do your crypto stuff on your side and then leave me alone.
Yeah. I mean, this is sort of the thing with Web3, right? Like the start of the journey in Web3 is the wallet, and that's also the hardest part to explain to people, especially people coming from like Web2 or even just really new people to the internet. Um, you know, the wallet is like the thing that enables all of the properties from Web3, like ownership and all the rest of those things. But you sort of need to explain that in Web2 you don't have any ownership to start off with, which is already a hard conversation for people to sort of get on board with. So yeah, it's like, okay, well, how much of that can you make invisible, and how much do you need people to know about?
Yeah, and it's also the fact that just the concept of blockchain, self custody and public keys, private keys, seed phrases. Like you basically need a degree to understand all of these things. Like it's not my
Right?
grandma gonna use that.
Yeah, exactly. And in Web3 and crypto, I still don't think there's a really good solution for getting people to put their keys somewhere. Like, do you write them down, or do you just hope your phone never dies or your wallet never dies? Like, where do you actually save these things? I don't think there's a solution out there for
Yeah, and
that.
like do you
There are
keep
some,
them in bank? Like we're actually getting rid of banks with crypto. So like
yeah,
this big contradiction. Self custody, but do you put your keys in custody?
yeah,
That's yeah,
right. It's just one of these unsolved problems. Yeah.
yeah. So, like going back to Zap, like who was the first person you told about this idea and how did they react?
Um, I think the first person I told was, my girlfriend, and sort of explained, like the meme of that guy on the whiteboard with all the things being like, this and this. I got out the whiteboard and drew it all up, and I was like, well, this could work this way, and I think, she entertained it for a while, and I think she still obviously entertains it, but like it's
By
not
the way,
just about entertaining. Sorry.
is she a normie or is she in crypto in general?
She's in Web3, um, but sort of new-ish to it. She's definitely come from like an art side. So
Okay, so she has an open mind, basically.
yeah, and like there's a she understands philosophy and like why you'd even like go down this route as a society to try and like give you all the benefits of Web3 and blockchain. So I think she definitely gets it from an ideological point of view. I think how she reacted was like, well, if this is the thing you want to do, like if this is the one shot you got to take, because it's going to cost you some time and it's going to cost you effort and it's has all the opportunity costs of another job, blah blah blah. You know, are you sure? Yeah. So I wouldn't be sitting here right now if I wasn't sure. So that's how it turned out. Yeah.
No, definitely. Like like building a product is not easy. Being a founder is even harder than that. Um, but building a product, like the story before you launch it, is I think the hardest part. It's the part where you're asking yourself, did you make the right decision? Do you have a good balance in your life? Do you still have a life at all?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so at the same time, like your product is very technical. So I think before going further, maybe you should give us like the elevator pitch of Zap.
So Zap is sort of broken into a few phases at the moment. Phases like 2 and 3 are sort of what we talk about when I talk about payments infrastructure. Phase 1 is really about sort of EVM wallet support on Fuel. That was what we came to Fuel, proposed, like we can solve this. And they might seem like separate things at the moment, sort of like one's a different product from the other, but they're sort of the same thing. They're about like, I guess you can think about them as being like, how do you make something invisible to the end user? So when you think about like EVM wallet support on Fuel, it's like, how can I make Fuel invisible to an EVM user? Not that we want to make Fuel invisible, obviously, but like the concept is there. And then when it comes to payments, it's like, how can I make payments how can I make blockchain invisible for someone trying to do payments? So Zap in itself is like a set of not only like infrastructure, but a product in terms of what it offers the end user at the end of the day. So phase 1, EVM wallet support for Fuel, and then phase 2 will be payments. So that's like mobile and web UI or whatever we need to do to cover that.
Okay, and so in the first place, before you even decided which chain you would build on, like why Fuel came up and why was it like the obvious choice for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think this sort of comes back to being in crypto back in the 2016 day and seeing like token launches and just, how long it took for a token launch to happen. These single transactions, I think it was just crazy. And I've looked at other chains to build something like payments on, and other VM architectures, and like EVM, but like EVM was still from a collective contribution perspective the best way, but the EVM like just sucked. Like it's too slow. So you go look at these other chains. They have their other languages. They're doing like crazy stuff. Whatever. Like that's fine. You dig into it a bit, you're going to find limitations to. Well, we at least found limitations to what we wanted to, do. And I'm not going to name any specific chains here because I don't think it's worth it. But so one of our requirements was like EVM alignment, and the second one was like it had to be super fast, and we needed a like ecosystem that was a little bit scrappy and willing to do things like and just go for it. And Fuel, like I touched on Fuel, dug into the docs, looked at the fuel VM, understood, okay, so they're not just using contracts. There's these other program types like predicates and scripts. Cool. What can you do with them? What? Why? Parallel transaction execution. All of that sort of stuff. UTXO model. It was like a must, right? So it was just sort of like a natural fit at that point. And I think also like one of the big sells, like which I don't think gets touched on enough. I know it like gets pushed a lot on by the team, but Sway is just so cool. Like it's the coolest language. So that was a big sell. The DSL had to be like easy to use. It's from a development perspective, you can just spend so much time teaching people how to use a DSL. So like if you have developers or like the people that we have in our team, they need to get up to speed real quick. So Sway was just like a refreshing piece of tech. Yeah.
Nice. Okay, so now that we know why fuel and why sway, then building Zap means you explained this concept of having two phases. The first one being uh, bringing EVM compatibility to fuel, and the second one is payment. So how do you balance building the infrastructure, so phase one, with designing the user experience that will come later on?
Yeah, I think like again, it comes back to this like corny thing that sort of I feel like is super polished. Like, how do you get the user to forget they're using crypto? Like, that's the balance. Or on a like prioritization point of view, it's like we follow the pain. So at the moment, EVM users are just having such a hard time using fuel. So that's the natural thing we should go after. Like, that's what phase one is all about. And, like when we come to designing payments or like what our UI looks like or what the mobile app will look like, it'll be the same sort of like psychology, like follow the pain, what and like currently sucks in terms of UX and the user like just journey. Like that's, I think, where we need to go with that. But when it comes to payments, you're not just dealing it within the crypto sphere. You're sort of like having to pull parts out of traditional finance. So, and like for the most part, the banks and like the payments providers have done a pretty good job. Like their onboardings, some of the onboarding is pretty good. But we'll pull from that. So, yeah.
Okay, and has the vision shifted since you started? And if so, why?
Yeah, I think it's like a yes and no. It's sort of like it's complicated. So the end goal has always been payments, and the thing is, when you dig into payments, you really understand like how far we are away from that as an industry, especially like in the blockchain industry. So there's a lot of outfits out there that do offer some sort of like blockchain based payment, but when you pull it apart a little bit, you realize, oh, they're just using some of the card network to do it, and at the TradFi level. So I think the vision in terms of like payments has always been the same, but the actual building out of like what is the infra, the vision behind the infra is sort of needed to fit to what needed to be built. So, even like building on fuel is just so much different from any other chain. So, you go in with a vision of like how this has always been done, and then you have to totally adjust that. So, yeah, it's sort of like it's a bit of a non-answer I'm giving you, like yes and no, but it's just complicated. So, yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Like when you look at, like, of course, like you mentioned, there's a bunch of crypto cards and payment solutions, but it's not mainstream, right? There's still a lot to do for adoption. Like first, people need to get abstracted away from the fact of having wallets. Like the solutions we currently have are not abstracting away the complexity of using wallets in the first place. Just making it easier to spend your crypto, but
Yeah,
the first hurdle part is still there, right? And it's
yeah,
still painful.
yeah. That's very true. Like that's a good way of actually saying it as well. It's just easier to spend your USDC or whatever, but from the
The
merchant
margin,
perspective, it's still the same thing. They're still getting charged whatever.
exactly. So, what's the part of Zap that you care about the most, even if the users that you don't have yet will not notice it in the first place?
I honestly think like the part that I care about the most is the predicate architecture. I think it's just like super cool, but it's also the part that users won't see at all. Like it's the thing that makes
Can
the
you,
whole thing work.
can you explain real quick what is a predicate?
Yeah, sure. It's so on Fuel. There's three program types. One's your traditional smart contract, and then there's this other one called a script, which like you can use to interact with smart contracts, but it doesn't store any state itself. And then there's this other type of program called a predicate, which is basically it's really like used for validation logic, and you can give it things like into its main function, but it can't store any state and it can't call a contract, but it can validate inputs and it can validate like what do they call it? They call it transaction introspection. So it can introspect the transaction and pull out what it can from that transaction in terms of inputs and outputs and the data it gets in, and validate whatever in that and produce a yes or no, like a true or false. And and the beauty about this is that predicates are stateless, so they don't have an impact on the state bloat problem that a lot of blockchains are facing now. And that's what makes them really like that's a huge pro for something like payments, where you're just going to have a lot of these things flying around at the same time, and you can execute predicates, in parallel. You can do them cheaply. They're just quick validation logic. It's super simple, and that's why we sort of built the Zap sort of wallet. And I put quote unquote around wallet. We built it with predicates, which inherently is a little bit more complicated, but it's a cleaner and more cheaper way to do it, like from a transaction cost and speed perspective.
That makes total sense. So if I summarize, the predicates are like returning a true or false statement to stateless, like this podcast, and at the same time, they enable you to execute based on condition, right? So if it returns true, then they execute the transaction. If not, then nothing happens.
Yeah,
And
basically
so
that's it.
that's perfect for payment.
Yeah, totally.
Awesome. Okay, so now I want to dig in more about your journey as a founder. Obviously, there's like not everything goes as planned. Obviously, it's a journey of the unknown as a founder. So, what would you say your day to day actually look like at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, day to day at the moment is probably, I would say, like 50% deep technical work. So that's me, like I explained a little bit earlier, back in my like windowless office, just getting down to business and being left alone. And then I think like the other 30% is talking to team and like making sure they haven't got any blockers and just making sure the show keeps going. And then probably about 20% is thinking about what's coming down the pike or what like needs to happen within the next few months, and design and just working out how things will fit together. So at least, we don't stop at some point. So it's like looking at that 3 to 6 month period, like which actually doesn't sound like a very long period to look into. It should be something, 3 to 6 months, and then like 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. But at the moment we're just trying to get things done quickly, so short time scale. So yeah, I mean that's generally what my day sort of looks like at the moment in terms of work.
So you're in the trenches, doing everything, in the hands in the dirt, getting into the coding, getting into managing people, and getting into the vision of the project. That's
just
great.
Wearing all the hats.
Yeah.
I think that's business though, right?
Yeah, that's what you need. I think like you need to understand every part of your project if you want to be able to make it work.
Yeah.
So how do you keep the team aligned when the product is still evolving?
Yeah, I mean, alignment of the team's probably one of the more difficult things to get right, I think, with your team, because not all your team is working on all the same stuff. They all have different talents, and they're working on different parts of the project. So I think it's just like pretty clear communication of like what needs to be done, why it needs to be done, and like letting them take ownership of it. And I think a lot of people within teams sometimes don't have a clear idea of like why they're doing something. So it's just explaining like this is the plan and this is the part of it that you're working on, or ask them questions, like keep them informed. Like it's things evolve all the time in crypto, especially like projects, and it's really hard. Like I think as the person who's sort of cooking up the design all the time, like I know how it should probably work, right? Like 90% work. I'm not perfect, obviously, but like to try and get that out of my head and into the hands of someone else where they actually also understand like how it should work, so they can then go do their part of it. It's always the challenge, and I think it's just trying to get the core idea, like proof of concept out, and without too much fluff, and then you can probably adjust it later if you really need to.
No, I feel like there are these memes that you can find online where you can see a founder with a clear vision in his head. Like he basically sees an iPhone, and in the end he has like a Tamagotchi.
Yeah, or like the horse, right? That's drawn really nice on one side of the picture, and then it's just like a stick figure on the other side of the picture. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, so like you mentioned, managing a team is hard, but managing a budget is even harder, because having a team means having mouths to feed, and you don't make revenue yet. Like you're pre-launch. So what is the hardest part about managing this budget?
Yeah, I think the budget one's really, really difficult. Like my thinking around the budget is basically with default dead until we prove phase one. Like, so every dollar goes towards that proof. So, if we can successfully deliver EVM wallet support, or when we deliver EVM wallet support on Fuel, and it becomes sort of invisible to the EVM wallet user that they're using Fuel, that proves concept. Like that proves things. So yeah, the budget, like everything goes towards just proving that concept.
Okay, and obviously you're about to launch. Like we're in a 3 to 6 months window, right? Or even shorter, I think. So how do you decide when do you spend aggressively versus when do you hold back?
I think like at this point we're probably 95% cooked on what the actual product will be. So it's more of a question of like when do we turn on the marketing tap, and how much, because marketing is like just the abyss you can just throw money into, and like and time, by the way, and time, and if you don't get it right, or you're not like marketing to the right people, you don't, get leads, and then you generally, your system doesn't generate revenue. So I think at the start of our go to market, it's like, wow, there is a specific budget, we can't overspend on it, and partnerships become pretty important. Yeah.
No, definitely. But marketing, it's a very strategic play. It's not an easy one. It looks easy from the outside. It seems like you're just showing your product, but it's not that easy. You need to build a story, you need to make people believe in that story, and then you need your product to be able to showcase that story you told them about.
Yeah,
So
totally. Yeah.
it's not an easy game. And so what is what has been, obviously Zap, you want to make things invisible to people, but in order to do that, it's very technical. So how do you make people believe in your story?
I think like Zap is a very technical like product when you dig into it a little bit, and I think that's something that at the start we sort of tried a little bit to showcase. This is the technical product, but like really, like unless you're talking to developers, no one really cares. So the story is about when you're marketing. It's about how is it going to make your either life better in the future, or how does it make you feel, or those sort of emotional or sociological like metrics or things you can approach. So at the start with EVM wallet support, it's like, well, how is this going to make your journey into crypto a lot easier for a new user? But how is it also going to make an existing user in crypto, like their journey into fuel, easier?
No, that makes sense. Okay, so, but I still feel like your story is much harder to tell pre-launch because you cannot show what you're saying, and your product is very visual. I guess it's more about the experience, like how that feels to use that, more than the behind the scenes, right? Like otherwise,
Yeah,
that you're talking to a developer echo chamber, and it's very small.
yeah, and I think like a lot of our sort of marketing over the last month has taken a bit of a turn to focus on like not we're not trying to tell users what the benefits of using Zap are. We're trying to tell them how they will feel using Zap. So like speed, easy, control. Like we use those sort of words in our marketing, and we've sort of chopped a lot of we've chopped a lot of words out of our marketing as well.
Yeah, I feel you. Okay, so now I want to talk about the hard parts of your product. Like what has been the toughest trade-off you had to make so far?
The toughest trade-off is probably like choosing to do EVM compatibility first when the vision was mobile payments. But Fuel needed it. Fuel needed EVM compatibility, and we needed Fuel. So it's sort of like, I think it's a bit of a fair trade. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. And is there still a decision you're not sure about that you had to make?
I don't know if there's a decision like we're unsure about, but there's definitely like an ongoing thought process about like how much education versus invisibility. And I think we sort of touched on this at the start of the pod. It's like, how much do you educate people about why they need a wallet, or what is a wallet, or what is a private key? And like, you can just go down and go through the labyrinth of stuff, and how much do we, make invisible? So if a user didn't need to know about a private key, would that be a problem for the user? Not until they, need the private key or they lose their phone or something like that. But then you ask the question, well, how can you just get them to move, a key or upgrade a wallet or something like that? Like from the perspective of like UX UI, like how do you remove that problem of trying to explain all the jargon to them. Instead, they can just move their wallet or their key to a new device. So, it's always a question of like, how much blockchain stuff do we hide and how much do we actually need to teach people why that matters?
Okay, and what's something you're maybe underestimated at the beginning of your development process?
Yeah, I think like we sort of, well, at least I think I sort of underestimated how much wallet infrastructure sort of assumes Ethereum's sort of model. And like, that's fine if you're doing EVM wallet support, because there's a bunch of like stuff out there for Ethereum. Ethereum's been out for quite a while, but when you look at other wallets like what's Solana's one, Phantom, like, okay, great, like let's try and get like Solana signing key stuff working on Fuel as well. Okay, let's go look at their wallet. Oh, it's closed source. So you sort of get hit with a roadblock there. So, users might not be able to use a Phantom wallet per se, but they might be able to use their private key. And it's like, well, how much does that sort of suck on the UX perspective if they have to like use their private key and not the actual UI to sign things? It's just like, there's so much stuff that uses Ethereum's wallet infrastructure, like heaps of other L2s, and it's not as easy as you think to just bolt on another signing method. Like, even though you can do it at like a private key level, when you're doing it at a user level where they're using a UI, it's not that easy. So
yeah, because they don't have to lose these users.
Yeah, exactly, and they sort of lock them in. But I don't know, like, wallets is a funny thing, I think. I think like Ethereum's like wallet infrastructure is generally it's good because users have a lot of choice. But when you get these new chains that pop up, yeah, a lot of the wallet infrastructure is just like super hard to use or understand or get any information on.
Okay, interesting. And so, was there a moment you thought, like, besides this Solana thing, this might not happen?
I think when we're in the like depths of predicates, like building the predicate stateless predicate wallet itself, it sort of meant we had to rewrite or rethink a lot of like the ways we integrated with things. Like, when I can feel there's various different connectors that talk to different wallets or like apps and things like that. For the predicate wallet to work, we just had to like think about so much. I don't want to say like so much more, because that's not quite right. There's just a lot of different pieces flying around, and it starts to get pretty complicated pretty quickly. And I think like when you're building something like a product, at first it's going to be like way more complicated than it needs to be. And as you evolve, like, you want to peel the sort of onions off what not onions, the like layers off the onion, and you want to refine it. And eventually you might get something that's pretty cool and like pretty nice. But sometimes you either don't have the chance to do that initially, and that's why it sort of looks a bit rough around the outside, or teams stop because it's really hard to refine a product. So, that leads to other things like, non-adoption, or like the product's not making any traction because it's just not refined enough. So I think that was the risk we sort of ran when we did the Zap wallet, because, fully stateless, full predicates, there's like a bunch of predicates in there. Some of them are big, some of them are small. It's pretty complicated to like use it, and that's why we've developed SDKs for it. But the alternative was like let's just make a smart contract wallet and do like 4337 or like whatever it is, 7 something 02, and do it that way. But then you're just like another wallet or like stateful wallet in a sea of wallets. So yeah, sometimes you gotta like take the hard road.
Yeah, I mean, you stay this way because otherwise you have no differentiation to them. Like being stateless means being different, and in many ways, like the experiences will not feel the same. It will be faster, will be cheaper, it will be more transparent, if I can say,
Yeah.
and actually more secure as well.
Yeah, and I think like also it aligns with fuel very well. Like if we were just doing another um, another smart contract wallet, like would fuel have really seen that as something that would have validated their tech stack? Like would they have cut us because we're not really using fuel the way it's supposed to be used? So there's other things like that that came into consideration.
Yeah. Okay. So we talked about before Zap. We talked about the spark that emerged Zap. We talked about building before launch, being a founder, the hard part of building. Now I want to touch on something that is very dear to me, community. So community is something very important in crypto, especially. It's like kind of the reason why you're building in the first place. You build for their experience to be better. You build for your community to grow bigger because of the simpler user experience you bring on the table. Zap is very technical. We touched that a bit, but I want to go deeper on this. Zap is a very technical product, but at the same time, on-chain users will use it in their daily activity if you market it right. So how do you get people excited about that before launching? Right? It's very abstract.
Yeah, like we can't obviously go out there and try to just push like the benefits of using stateless predicates, right? Like, who cares?
Yeah.
I think for us, it's like because we're not pushing a token right now. It's not speculation. We're sort of building a community around shared frustration, I guess you would say. So, everyone's got some sort of onboarding pain that they go through in crypto. At some level, there's some level there. So the community that we're sort of hustling up at the moment, especially because it's a phase one sort of thing. It's about the frustration of using wallet infrastructure on different chains. So yeah, we're sort of rallying around that at the moment. Shared frustration.
Okay, and in this multitude of stateful wallets, what do you have to say to users to use them to use Zap instead?
Oh yeah, I mean, when it comes to Zap, I think the stateful wallet, like, do we actually have a stateful wallet on Fuel, like a actual contract wallet? I don't think we actually do, right? Like, there's EOAs, and then um, there's like your predicate wallet itself. But I think when it comes to using a stateful wallet, um, you've got to be able to put up with the frustrations of using a stateful wallet. So and that's like specific to some chains that do that, like mostly EVM chains. So your EOA is not really a stateful wallet per se, right? It's just like you're just signing transactions. But when it comes to Zap, I think it's more about like what are the possibilities and are they endless? Like I don't want to say, there's endless possibilities to using Zap, but there's definitely an upgrade path to using Zap where if we put out a new feature and we bump it into the next wallet version, you can upgrade that. You can choose to upgrade. Obviously, we can't upgrade for you. That's something that we've talked about quite a lot. like, can we upgrade your wallet for you? At the moment, we're not going to do that because some of the limitations with how predicates work. Maybe there'll be a solve for that later on, but you choose what features you want with the Zap wallet, and when we have multiple versions, you can choose what you want to opt in for and what you don't. In a stateful wallet, I think what would usually happen is, you get a contract wallet, and you might be able to upgrade that. And who knows if that code's going to get upgraded by whoever wrote it or not. So, yeah, I think the real thing around like Zap and the Zap wallet per se is about speed. It's about, you're not having a massive impact to state bloat, which is something that Fuel is really built for, and you're doing it cheap. You do transactions cheap. It costs you nothing to set up a Zap wallet, right? It costs you, if you have to deploy a contract to do a stateful wallet, it's going to cost you something, and sometimes it can be actually quite a lot of money.
Yeah, obviously. Like being stateless means also not really being on chain. Like it's the interesting part as well.
Yeah, predicates are quite funny, right? Because they sort of pop up and then they they end up getting executed and then they sort of disappear a little bit. But I was going to say something, but I sort of forgot what I was going to say actually. So
that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah.
Building a community is very hard. There is, as we said, multitudes of wallets. There's multitudes of incentives programs that are running to kind of buy the users. There are as well a lot of projects trying to build expectations of high rewards as well, with points programs. Like we've seen wallets points programs as well running. To name a few, there's been a Rainbow, Rabby, and a lot of others wallets have opted for this approach to keep the users excited and keep on using them. What's your approach to onboard users to Zap? I know it's a tough one, but would love to, even if it's not a refined idea or a final one, just to get your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I mean, the usual go-to in crypto is token, some sort of token, like incentivize people with a token, and who knows what they're going to do with it after the token drop. I don't think so. Tokens are really, like, token launches and tokenomics is really hard to get right in crypto. Like, I don't think any team's really got it real right. So I don't think we'll be going through some sort of like fungible token launch of some kind. But what we will build in later, we have some ideas about how to do it, is something that's at least sustainable in terms of gas and sustainable for an ecosystem. So we want to tie in some loops around how you sort of attract users to create yield on their assets that are hanging around in their wallet doing nothing all day. Like, if they're not spending them, what are they doing with them? They should be able to at least get some yield out of that. But, it needs to be sustainable, and maybe some of that yield can go towards paying for gas, or, ideas like that actually make something. I'm not going to say what it is exactly, but makes some offering that you give users that are using your product, something at the end of the day that they don't just dump for, quick money.
Okay, so it's pretty much like putting your money at work, right?
Yeah, I think that's sort of the point. I think it's more about sustainability and how you can get users to actually keep the assets sort of in your ecosystem, and it be safe and it be manageable, and they get something out of it. Like, maybe they get to do transactions for free if they're opting into something.
Okay, interesting. And who would be paying for that? Because everything has a cost.
Yeah, I mean, if you're putting them into some sort of lending protocol or you're putting them into some sort of yield protocol, like that's the question: who's paying for it? You know, someone on the other side of you lending your assets, even if they're very short-term lends, they might pay some premium to borrow some USDC off you for 6 or 7 or 30 blocks or whatever it is.
Okay. No, I think I see exactly where you're trying to go. So maybe Zap will have a treasury that they will use to kind of borrow some funds, put them at work, and then pay people with like premiums for holding their tokens in the wallets, basically.
Or even like
but I'm sure it's more complicated than that.
Yeah, or even like we don't need to necessarily run our own treasury or have people choose our treasury. They could choose an array of different places to put their assets, and they can choose. Maybe there's like some sort of index of different places they can put their assets to get some yield.
Yeah. So like a 401k, basically.
Kind of, yeah. Like a stock index, I guess you would say.
That's interesting. Okay, so in the ideal world, what does a meaningful community for Zap look like now and then post-launch?
I think like meaningful community now, phase 1, EVM wallet support, it's about people who can just use the EVM wallet and not have frustration, right? Like meaningful community to us at the start is like we want feedback from users who still having an onboarding problem into the ecosystem, or things are still difficult for them. So like a meaningful community for us is a community that rallies around like, hey, this infrastructure works, and it's not trying to take something from me. It's not trying to like give me some shill. A meaningful community is just a validation around the concept of what we're trying to do, which is like, make things invisible, make the UX better. And hopefully that'll get validated by users who actually use Zap when they use it.
Okay, and do you think products like Zap succeed more because of how great they are built out, or because of timing and strategy?
I think great products really need both. They need both. But timing without sort of technical excellence basically creates your Theranos, right? Like you can have all the timing in the world and shell it, or like have the best marketing in the world, but if it doesn't deliver the actual product at the end of the day, what are you actually doing? So on our side, I know we're a little bit like on the slower side when it comes to putting things out to market or getting things done, but I'd rather choose like excellence over perfect timing. Unfortunately, like that's the unfortunate trade-off, right? Because like in saying that, it's sort of like a hard one as well, because you can't make the product super perfect, because you might just never release it. So it's better to have something out there, but you still have to make it excellent.
Makes sense. Okay, and so going through momentum and meaning, what keeps you going without the yet validation of your product? Obviously, you've been building for how long? 1 year?
I think we've sort of been like probably doing it for 1 year, and the idea was like 18 months, almost 2 years ago, like conceptually. I think really what keeps us going at the moment when we're like building is like every day or every couple of days or whatever it is, like you'll see crypto Twitter or some social media channel, like someone will be complaining about some sort of EVM wallet support, or like when Trezor or when Ledger on fuel, and like that's that's validation enough to keep going, you know?
Yeah, and do you feel the pressure to move fast or to get it right?
Yeah, I mean, obviously in crypto, like you want to get things done pretty quickly. There's you know, there's always the argument of like first mover advantage, but you got to like have the discipline to ship something right. And I think like just coming back to like a psychological perspective, like if we deliver something, it's like this question of like, and when you're talking about community, it's like it's really about like story versus utility, right? Like what pure utility is for infrastructure, and Web3 we've been doing like pure utility for years and years and years. So like we've got all this infrastructure now, it's super cool, but you know, what is the story? The story is products. The story is like apps people can use. So payments, like they need a story because they're inherently social, right? Pure utility would be like we enable EVM wallets on Fuel, but that's not why people will use that. They'll use it because, yeah, and we're telling a story about payments that like finally work as they should. They should be instant and cheap. And the predicate like architecture that we've sort of talked about quite a lot is that's the utility part of what we're offering, right? But unfortunately, it's the part that nobody will really see or care about. But pay anyone from anywhere instantly for free is the story, right? Fuel provides the utility. We provide the narrative that makes people care, right? Nick has been talking about this for quite some time. Fuel's here to provide infrastructure. You know, they're not here to provide, you know, if you just want money, don't come to Fuel, right? They're providing infrastructure. They're providing utility. It's you as the team, as the people who are building on Fuel to provide the product and the story. So that's sort of our approach there.
An infrastructure is an infrastructure. It's what you use to build something on, you know. It's like you would use like a crane, which is the infrastructure, to build a building, right? So that's pretty much what this is about. And people often confuse that, you know, and like the story is you. The story is the users that use your product. So when you think about launch, do you see it as a finish line or as a starting point?
Yeah, such a good question. I think it's honestly, it's both. You know, it's like learning what we got wrong, but also like the start of when we start doing payments properly. You know, like when we start building out that side of it. So launch for us, phase one. That's phase one, right? That's the start. We're going to learn from like, you know, how was whatever our story was wrong. What in our infrastructure we got wrong. Hopefully, you know, you don't want the infrastructure part wrong, but you can adjust the story, and inevitably we're going to have to adjust the story a little bit from, you know, EVM wallet to support stuff to payments and the story around payments, and especially around like merchants, not just the user facing thing. Like our users will still be the merchants as well. So yeah, it's both. Yeah.
Okay. And so are you one of those perfectionists that think, you know, the product is never finished?
No, I think, you know, that's the thing with the scientific background. You want everything, you know, over engineered and like want to cover every one of your bases. And, you know, in Web3, you know, obviously it's really important to cover your bases when it comes to security. You can't, you know, skimp out on that. You need to cover every single base. But when it comes to actually putting some product out there, it's better to have something that's a little bit maybe rough around the edges than no product at all. You know, like our web UI is probably not what a lot of Web3 companies would end up putting out, which we feel like is very boring and bland stuff, it's either going to be a hit or it's going to be a miss. But whatever it is, it'll be something that's a little bit different. It's not going to be something boring. So it's not going to be perfect either.
Yeah, I totally see where you're coming from. So this was not exactly my question, but I still like the answer. My question was more about, like, let's say you launched, you launched payment as well. Are you done, or do you still feel like your product will never end? Basically, you will still iterate and iterate over time until it's like perfect.
Well, I think at that point, the market will tell you what it's after, and whether or not, that's way outside of our purview when it comes to like payments or what we're set up to do. That's another question. But obviously, you can always refine a product down to some better version of itself. So who knows, like, will it be adding features, or would it be like adding another product, or a complete evolution of your product offering? Yeah, who knows?
Okay, and so what would you say is the single most critical milestone you need to reach before your launch?
Before launch, I think it would be sort of giving out testnet deployment to a select set of EVM users. And they might be people who have already been in crypto, they might be new ones, but giving them the testnet deployment and then making like successful transactions on Fuel without any friction. And the key point there is without friction. That will be a pretty critical milestone, an internal like success metric before we go live. Yeah.
Okay. And would you be looking for, like, in the audience, maybe we have people willing to become your ambassadors, or people that will cheer for you and kind of sell this story you want people to believe in?
Yeah, absolutely. If you're interested in being an ambassador or trying things out slightly earlier than others, I would encourage you to write a comment or drop your EVM wallet address and get in touch, jump onto our socials somehow, and hit us up. We want to hear from you. So, for sure.
Awesome. And so just before we wrap it up, there's a question I just love to ask. If you could send one message to yourself before you started Zap, what would it be?
Yeah. There's so many messages I could send to myself. I think
you have just one chance, and it's not a book. It's like one message.
I think it would be like, the infrastructure is harder than you think, but users care less about perfection than you think. Yeah, I think that would be it. Something like that.
That's a good one. And another question just before we wrap it up: who else is building something raw and worth talking to, maybe for the next podcast?
Yeah, it's within the Fuel ecosystem. I know there's a lot of like underground people. I don't know exactly who would they
not
be.
necessarily.
You would have actually, yeah. I was going to say, like, you would have a better idea than me actually, like, about everything that's going on in the Fuel ecosystem. But there's a guy. He's on Twitter and he's got a website. His name's Tim, and he is from Brisbane, Australia, and he's sort of doing this really raw version of payments in a merchant terminal. And we've taken a lot of inspiration from his sort of raw approach. It's called Free Pay POS. So if you look him up, he might be. He's head of crypto research at an investment firm. So I like his approach to just getting stuff done. So yeah, we've taken a few ideas from his POC. Yeah, and it's the same sort of approach. Like, don't skimp the hard part, which is like, if you're going to do it over traditional payments networks, you're not actually solving the problem. So yeah, he's got that same sort of mentality.
Awesome. Well, Anthony, I'm wishing you the best of luck for launch. Hopefully we can talk again, let's say 6 months from now, when the product is live and we can use it, so that we can have the after thoughts. And thank you for joining Stateless. This was episode 2, and this was Zap.
Awesome. Thanks, Ruben. It's been great.